One Network News and AMP Country Calendar are next. George Cole stars in My Good Friend after Barrymore crack another challenging case with Kavanagh QC.
Good evening, New Zealand leading tonight's One Network News. Agreement at last on a future for Northern Ireland. 2 years of negotiations end with a peace settlement.
Relief and cautious optimism on the streets of Belfast, the people prepared to put aside their differences.
And the Americans take charge of their own golfing major with Tiger Woods poised to pounce.
And how about those 3 shots?
Today we have just a sense of the prize that is before us. The work to win that prize goes on. We cannot, we must not let it slip from our grasp.
British Prime Minister Tony Blair hails an historic peace agreement many thought could never happen.
After hundreds of years of division and 30 years of armed conflict, Northern Ireland can at last look forward to a peaceful future. More than 17 hours past the midnight deadline, negotiators arrived at a compromise plan they could all agree on. It includes a return to self-government in Northern Ireland after 26 years of direct rule from London, a sharing of power by Protestants and Catholics, an end to violence by paramilitary groups on both sides, and new constitutional links between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Our Europe correspondent Marilena Roderick reports from Belfast.
To those who disdain democracy, to those whose tools are bombs and bullets, your way is not the right way.
It wasn't just history. Until now, it was impossible.
I said when I arrived here on Wednesday night that I felt the hand of history upon us. Today, I hope that the burden of history can at long last start to be lifted from our shoulders.
Divided leaders with bitter grievances uniting, at least on paper.
We have resisted attempts to force us out, to marginalise us, to silence and intimidate us. We are here, reaching out the hand of friendship.
We see this agreement, this treaty, as addressing the wounds that have damaged our society and ensuring that our diverse traditions attract respect, and above all, as laying the foundations for a healthy, vibrant democracy.
Under the peace plan, a Northern Ireland Assembly will be elected like a parliament in June with 108 members. It'll have an executive committee with 12 ministers. The First Minister or chairman is likely to be Unionist leader David Trimble. That committee will set out the new North-South Council for matters affecting both Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. In effect, it gives Unionists who are loyal to Britain some control over any moves for an independent, united Ireland. But concessions on the nationalist front, sentences for paramilitary or IRA prisoners may be reduced by 2/3, or will be released within 2 years. It doesn't include groups who break the ceasefire. Crisis came in the last hour today when some Unionists walked. Collapse of talks were averted when President Bill Clinton personally rang leaders at Stormont to do the deal.
The agreement that has emerged from the Northern Ireland peace talks opens the way for the people there to build a society based on enduring peace, justice, and equality.
Today, relief was huge but guarded. Copies of the agreement were out just hours after the deal was signed. These glossy pages will be sent to every home in Northern Ireland. Then the people will decide in a referendum in May. Today wasn't the end, it's just the beginning. Marilena Roderick, One Network News, Belfast.
The peace agreement has been welcomed by political leaders around the world. UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan hailed the spirit of compromise between the parties, while South Africa's President Nelson Mandela says it demonstrates the value of negotiation rather than confrontation. Here at home, Foreign Minister Don McKinnon has praised the agreement, particularly the spirit of Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Prime Minister Blair has really put himself out to achieve this. He's put his government's reputation on the line, he's put his own reputation on the line. You know, one hopes that it does succeed.
But the real test of the new agreement is yet to come. peace will depend on the will of the people to put aside their differences. And on the streets of Belfast today, there was every indication that they've had enough of bloodshed. BBC's George Eakin reports.
As their politicians laboured to produce an agreement, the people of the Ormeau Road, Protestant and Catholic, held an Easter vigil. In this area, so often the scene of confrontation in the marching season, they prayed together for a new peaceful future.
In the modern history of Northern Ireland, Good Friday hopefully is the beginning of a new era.
Brilliant, brilliant altogether. It's a good day. Over the moon, yeah, thank God.
News of a deal emerging at Stormont swept through St George's Market in Belfast.
It'll be one of the greatest days in our history.
I don't think you'll ever see peace here.
Doubts not shared by this woman whose husband was murdered by terrorists.
I think there has to be an end sometime, and I suppose that we all have to think about looking into the future and not looking back.
Regardless of the political moment, many parents took their children to a fun fair in South Belfast today. The man who runs it is John Adcroft, a Scot who's lived here for 8 years, now with a young family.
Well, I'm with my son who was born in Belfast 19 months ago. And I would like him to live here and live with everyone.
People across Northern Ireland will see today's agreement in different ways. Some are cynical or suspicious, others euphoric that politicians may have found a way out of deadlock and decades of violence.
The peace agreement will be put to a referendum in Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic on May the 22nd. Elections for new Legislative Assembly are expected to be held in late June.
In other world news, an unidentified New Zealander is reported to be one of 9 people slightly injured in a bomb blast in Turkey. The bomb went off near the Blue Mosque, one of Istanbul's most popular tourist spots. No one has claimed responsibility, but local officials blame separatist Kurdish rebels.
Here at home, a Christchurch man is recovering from a 200-metre fall on Mount Rolleston in the Southern Alps. The man in his 30s was with a climbing party when he slipped down an icy slope. A companion managed to walk out and alert authorities. The Westpac rescue helicopter eventually winched him out. He's been taken to Christchurch Hospital suffering serious abdominal injuries.
A 2-day private search for Olivia Hope and Ben Smart has been abandoned. Volunteer divers failed to find any trace of the missing pair. The search in Pelorus Sound was led by a Nelson psychic who believes the missing pair are anchored to the seabed. Using a high-tech metal detector, the divers searched 30 metres down, dredging an area of 500 square metres. Ben and Olivia have now been missing more than 100 days.
The Conservation Department is warning against trying to keep native harrier hawks as pets. DOC has found evidence that people may be illegally trying to domesticate the protected birds with cruel results. John Newton reports.
These are the lucky ones, recuperating at a Manawatu bird rescue sanctuary after being hit by passing traffic. This bird was not so fortunate. When he was found, his wing feathers were clipped and one wing severed through the bone.
Initially, I imagine it's been hit by a car, and then I think the rest of it's been a pair of head shears or something that's been pretty barbaric.
It's roadkills of small animals like this which provide an important food source for the hawk. But the bird also risks becoming a road accident victim. It's when people find an injured bird that DOC says they should hand them in, not keep them as a pet. The harrier hawk is a protected bird. DOC says it's cruel to try and domesticate it.
It can never be tamed. Some people probably have that idea that they can be, because falcons overseas are kept, but it's not possible with a native harrier.
Keeping hawks is an offence, carrying a fine of up to $1,500. DOC says if it catches anyone, they will be prosecuted. John Newton, One Network News.
Here at home, 2 young children are dead after fire engulfed their home late this afternoon in the Auckland suburb of Point England. Firefighters from 3 machines found the house well alight when they arrived. They were confronted with evidence of a tragic attempt by the children to escape the flames.
The kiddies involved, it appears that they've crawled inside the wardrobe, which is quite a common thing for youngsters to do to get away from the smoke and the fire. And that's probably the worst thing that they can do, you know.
Today's tragedy means there have been 4 house fire deaths in the country this week.
The annual Alexandra Bunny Hunt has provided the first real evidence that the killer virus RCD is slashing the Central Otago rabbit population. In contrast to past years, rabbits were scarce, with shooters having to hunt them down. Although there were only half the number of teams this year, the rabbit kill totaled just 5,000 compared to 24,000 last year. Later in the program, aerial acrobatics wow the crowds at Wanaka.
First, Bernie has sport.
Thanks, Tom. After the break, the US Masters field sorts itself out. Ranks faded, but Freddie's still firing. Plus, 2 international halfbacks get close up and personal in a Super 12 rugby tussle. And an Australian League enforcer might have played his way out of Test contention against the Kiwis.